And a very warm welcome to everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank all of you for taking out time today and being a part of this session. Today we have the immense joy of being in conversation with Elizabeth Denley, who is the co-author of the book Heartfulness Way Book. She is also a heartfulness practitioner and a trainer and holds a PhD in ecological science. Sister Elizabeth, thanks a lot for being a part of this session today, and it's an honor to have you with us.
Thank you, Kamya. I'm really delighted to be here and with everybody.
Thank you, sister. So before we start our session, I would just briefly explain about it to the audience. We'll be diving deep into the insights of the book, and we'll be having some deep conversations about the book, and I'm looking forward to it. Because we have limited time, I've picked up a few questions that I hope will kind of help all of us in our spiritual journey and also our day-to-day life. So I would like to begin with the first question. It sounds quite basic, yet I feel all of us, we struggle with it. Sister, how do you think this book and heartfulness practices, it helps us deal with our emotions, especially at the speed at which how we react to it? How does it help create that space between how we feel and how we react?
Okay, it's a wonderful question and very pertinent to people from all age groups, but I think especially to young people who can feel so strongly and so intensely at an emotional level and don't know how to manage that. And I wish I'd have had all this wisdom and understanding when I was that age, because I was exactly the same. But it's come over time, and maybe age is also, it brings wisdom. But there are a lot of things you can do for this that are essential to heartfulness and revolve around the practices. So some of you may have heard the word chakra, and you may have heard Daji touch upon the chakra system, how we start our journey in heartfulness in the heart. And then as we go through the heart, through the chakras of the heart, up through the mind, back to the center of our being, which of course, even though we have this map, if you like, of the chakras, it's all within the heart. So, it's not just about spiritual evolution. It's very much about how we live in the world also, how we manage our day-to-day lives, how we cope, as you say, with emotional challenges, with ups and downs. What in the West, in Western psychology, they call emotional intelligence. And of course, this is a word that's, it's a phrase that's bandied around all the time now. People use it without really understanding what it means. But when you look at yogic psychology, and especially the tradition of heartfulness or Sajmarg, there's such an incredibly deep understanding of how this works. And what does Daji say? I'm just going to read you a couple of little passages from chapter 8, which is on the heart, and it's called The Realm of Emotions and Qualities. Daji says, an evolved consciousness must manifest in our day-to-day living, and that is where the heart comes into play. In fact, if the heart-based qualities are not expressed in worldly life, the higher spiritual states will not be available to us. So all the way through this book, you find what is the essence of Sajmarg, which is not part of the traditional spiritual understanding. And I think this may resonate with the young people that you're talking about very, very well. Because in the past, especially ancient times, but it's sort of revered, people leave their worldly life to go towards spirituality, as if it's somehow a higher thing, it's beyond, and worldly life is somehow some, crappy, second-rate alternative. And that's not what our masters talk about in Sajmarg at all. In fact, Babaji described it as just like the bird with two wings. We need both the spiritual and the worldly to fly. And all our masters have talked about this and the role of being in a normal worldly existence in our spiritual evolution. The fact that if you run away, it's not going to work, because where do we learn all the human qualities of compassion, of learning to manage anger, of dealing with restlessness, of dealing with our fears, our worries, our jealousies, our guilt, our likes and dislikes, all our prejudices, etc. We don't learn that stuff by sitting in some ivory tower away from society. We learn it in families, we learn it with our friends, we learn it with our colleagues, we learn it when we fall in love with somebody romantically when we're young. You know, we have to immerse ourselves in life to feel these things and have the reactions that you're talking about. So for most people, what happens? Somebody insults us at work or at school or in the family, we react. Now that reaction may be to fight back in an aggressive way, in anger, or it may be to crumple into a heap and burst into tears and just, you know, feel poor me. It doesn't matter. The thing is, we have a reaction. And whether that's an internal sad me victim reaction or whether it's an aggressive I'm going to fight back reaction, it's still a reaction that creates an emotional charge in our system, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And when we have that emotional charge, if we don't let go of it straight away, I mean, the ideal is to prevent that from happening, and that's what happens when you practice over time. But in the meantime, we all fall for this and have our reactions, and then we have to come out of it somehow. Some people wallow in it for days, months, years. Somebody hurts them and they can't get over it, or they hold a grudge. Babaji talks about it as revenge or resentment, but you know, it can even be as simple as I'm not going to talk to that person anymore. They were mean to me. Or ignoring the person, or just sulking, or, you know, there's so many ways we do this, right?
Correct.
And they're very human ways. But what happens when we work in the heart is we work with the 5 chakras of the heart. Chakra 1's here on the lower left side, chakra 2 on the right, chakra 3 on the upper left, chakra 4 on the upper right, and the throat chakra, chakra 5 here. And each one is associated with a spectrum of emotions. And as we practice, as we meditate, and we receive transmission through the practices of heartfulness, what happens is that we start to work with these emotions. And over time, we develop mastery over them, and we learn how to pause. As you said, this pause, instead of straight on reacting, we learn how to stop, center ourselves, connect with our inner self, and ask, what is going on here? So these spectrums, and they're in the book here, you can read it in this chapter here, on the 5 C's and 5 D's of the heart region, become our working tools with emotions in a way that psychology as an intellectual thing cannot do. Because we feel these things deeply. We don't just think anger, do we? You know, it permeates our whole being. Our pulse rate goes up. We might get red in the face. We feel hot. Our body feels uncomfortable. We feel this friction. Our mind is just all over the place and not able to function properly. All sorts of physiological things happen. This part of the brain takes over instead of the thinking function. And we can't think properly. And we just cry, or we yell, or we pace around the house, or some of us do, you know, activities like cleaning the house to try and release the energy. Everybody has their way of dealing with it. So Daji talks about that a lot in this, and he says He says at chakra 1 we have this spectrum of contentment to discontentment.
Mm-hmm.
And is discontentment worse than contentment in terms of our spiritual evolution? This is where this chapter is really revealing. He says no. He says that we use these all. So when we're discontent, what does it mean? It means that something's happened that we don't like, which means that we had an expectation of something happening that wasn't met, which means that my longings, my wishes, my desires haven't been met. So it's showing me something about myself. It's showing me, okay, I had this expectation or this longing or this wish for something to happen a certain way. It could be that a particular boy likes me when I'm 16, 17 years old or 18, 19 years old. Or it could be that I do well in my exams. Or it could be that my friends treat me the right way, or, so many different things. And then what happens when it doesn't happen? We're discontent, we're disappointed, we're unhappy. And so what Daji's saying here is, don't see this as a bad thing. See this as like the finger pointing to something. What's it showing me? So even the D's of the heart, the discontent, the disturbance or restlessness that comes when the second chakra is not at peace with itself, the displeasure of the third, the discouragement of the fourth, the delusion of the fifth, they're all pointing to something that you can change. And when you become aware, and how do you become aware? You become aware through meditating, through learning to witness what's going on inside yourself as well as outside yourself. At deeper levels, yes, we all want to go deep and have beautiful experiences. But sometimes it's as simple as being aware, okay, I'm not happy about this. I'm fearful. Why am I fearful? And the minute these things come, you will learn about yourself, and through practice, you will learn to manage the emotions. And the more you meditate and the more you move through these chakras, the easier it becomes. And the other thing Daji does in this part here, which is incredible, he says, I'll give you an example. I'll just read one because we don't have that much time. But so he says, when you are with someone and you feel vibrations in chakra 2, the soul chakra, and find calmness. So you're with a human being and you feel calm. You can assume that there is some level of soul resonance. There will be a feeling of lightness and softness. And compare that with somebody that you don't feel that way with, that you feel uncomfortable with. We all know the difference, right?
Yeah.
All of us know it. Even a small child knows it. So he says, while feeling this peace in chakra 2 in any relationship, if the vibrations in chakra 3 are also not heavy but feel as if you are melting, then you can deduce with confidence that this relationship is going to be soulful. Your heart will feel free, burdenless, expansive, light, and joyous, which happens whenever something good for your evolution is happening. So he goes and he explains the same sort of thing for chakras 3 and 4, etc., and how we use this. And then he ends it by saying, in other words, heed both the C's and D's. Use them to build emotional intelligence. And this is a fantastic way for a young person to develop that incredible wisdom of the heart and to learn to listen to the heart. Because the minute you start doing this, you're listening to your heart. And it's telling you from experience what you need to do.
Absolutely.
It's very simple. Yeah.
It's quite beautiful, and Daji often says that you just have to listen to your heart, and you'll never be wrong with your decisions if you learn to if you learn to master over that, then you'll just end up taking the right decisions for yourself. And how you explained that with increased awareness, how can we use it for our own benefit? And the other beautiful thing was, as you had said, and I guess it's somewhere mentioned in nonviolent communication as well, that hoping that the other person will do this and this specific thing is fine. But emphasizing on the expectation that this needs to happen, you'll just end up bothering yourself with that, right?
Yes.
That so it's quite beautiful. I feel half of the times when we're expecting anything to happen, or if we have a complaint, or if someone has disappointed us, it's rather a sign for ourselves to sit with ourselves and ask that what's wrong, something's not right, that there is something that I need to fix within, rather than pointing it out on the externalities of it.
Yes. Why is this troubling me? Is the
Correct.
question. Yeah. And it could
Right.
be a very valid reason, but you'll discover something about yourself through asking it.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's quite beautiful. So now extending the idea of inner space and clarity, I feel many young people today carry deep-seated beliefs within themselves. Like, am I good enough? Am I worthy enough? Do I deserve this or not? So how does this book support the transformation of these limiting beliefs? And how does it help one experience one's limitless potential?
Okay. That's exactly what this book is all about. You've described it in a nutshell. So, what does Daji do here? He starts with the topic of beliefs. So, this book is based on Daji's wonderful love for another book, Babaji's Reality at Dawn, which also starts with beliefs, but under the guise of religion, because back when Babaji was living in India at the time, when he wrote it in the 1940s, that was the main belief system that he was talking about. Whereas today, science is considered, I mean, pretty much everywhere in the world, except in really traditional societies, indigenous societies. Science, whether it's India or Australia here or the US or Europe or whatever, science overrides religion almost on every count. And so we can't just talk about religion when we talk about beliefs anymore. And like you rightly mentioned, a lot of it is self belief. What do I believe about myself? And this has come from our past. It's come from our culture. It's come from our family traditions. You know, it even comes when we're inside the womb from our mother's feelings and thoughts and the environment around us, you know, so many things. And we grow up very much unaware of a lot of this stuff because we're cocooned in a family, we're cocooned in a society, in a community. And for many years, we don't see outside that really until maybe we might go to college. You know, when we start going to school, we meet people with other beliefs. College, often we might move away from home and discover more. And we may travel or we may join different groups who are doing different things and discover more beliefs. But what forms us is these first few years, the first 5 to 7 years. And these beliefs are so inbuilt in our neural networks. They're so inbuilt in our way of being that we just consider them as normal. And it's down to the minutest details. Like if I get up in the morning and I'm used to cleaning my teeth and I can't clean my teeth for some reason, I'll get annoyed about it, right? Because it doesn't feel right. Or if I'm used to waking at a certain time and it doesn't happen, or so many different things become these belief systems that are ingrained in us. And of course, they go from the most mundane to the most deep and philosophical in our nature. What do I believe? Do I believe in God or not? And so we start with belief. Belief has a lot of bad press, but Daji doesn't give it bad press here. He says, I'll read, it's belief is our starting point. It is also a stepping stone to truth. A belief is often a piece of the truth, but it may also become an outdated, biased, or twisted version of the truth that hardens over time into dogma. The trouble is, when you believe something, you are locked into that belief. And if you remain satisfied with belief alone, you will never leap into experience. So this is what we all have. And the thing is, a lot of us think that if I've been practicing heartfulness for a number of years, that I'm not affected by this anymore. This is a misnomer. We all have beliefs. And wherever I am at the moment, my current stage today, whether I've been practicing for 5 days or 50 years, it doesn't matter. I'm going from this starting point today to my destination of what my whole full human potential can become. And if I get locked into the belief that somehow I'm already along this journey and I don't need to look at my beliefs, it's the biggest misnomer. And Babaji said it very beautifully. He said he always felt like a new Abhyasi. So how to take this every day and have that same attitude of openness? How can you cultivate this as a young person, Kamya, or your friends or your colleagues, to cultivate this attitude of openness and wonder that I'm here to learn, I'm here to grow, this never stops. You know, when you're little, it's natural because everything is like, it's so wonderful and you're like a sponge, you're absorbing. But unfortunately, a lot of people lose that quality, that childlike wonder at the world. And really, belief is when we start getting locked into viewpoints. Like a viewpoint, for example, that as a Sajmarg Abhyasi, I'm somehow better than somebody who is doing something ritualistic. I mean, that's a big trap to feel that way. Because the minute I feel that way, that feeling of superiority is there, it's my ego. And who am I to say? I may be practicing, but I may be just as ritualistic in the way I do things. And somebody else who is praying to an idol may actually see God in that idol. Unless you go deep enough, you won't know. So beliefs limit us. And the whole of the first chapter, which I think is the biggest chapter, is about this. How beliefs then limit us into prejudices. How we develop hatred for certain groups or certain nations or certain people in our community. For example, what happens if happened to me once. I came across, it was very early in the morning and I was going to satsang and my car had broken down, so I was getting public transport and I had to leave very early. This was in Sydney in Australia, and I came upon a drunk homeless guy in the bus stand where I was going to wait for the bus at about 5:30 in the morning. And my first reaction was, oh, do I want to go there? And I thought, okay, that's a good fear to have, but it's also a prejudice that somehow he's more dangerous. And I had to look at the whole thing and figure out what was survival and protective and what was my prejudice. And, it went on and on and on and on. But we all have these things, right? And so how to remain open. And I think if you can cultivate it at your age, it will be a wonderful, lasting skill to have in life.
Correct. Hopefully, I'll try my best to do that. And as you had said, that, a lot of times, because of our own past experiences, we develop certain beliefs. But what's important is to still keep yourself open and to not lose that childlike quality, where you can just be in awe of life and just look at things with a fresher and newer perspective.
Yeah.
Right.
And if you feel that you're a free thinker and you're beyond belief, think again. Various things, like you mentioned earlier, how we feel about ourselves. And Daji writes here, for example, if a person learns at an early age that they are not worthy of love or success, it may cripple them all their life. But we have the tools in heartfulness to transcend that. That's the thing.
Correct.
Through these practices. So, what will keep somebody stuck for their whole life without that? We have the option to actually work upon in ourselves. It's good to look at take your top 5 beliefs. Sit down and do an exercise.
Mm-hmm.
What are my top 5 beliefs? Are they backed by experience? And then see what comes of it. See whether what you believe is really true or not. And for many of us, these things of I am not worthy, or, I'm fearful, or I am unconfident, I'm not a confident person, or whatever. These beliefs we have about ourselves are what keep us stuck. Our self-doubt.
Absolutely. That sounds like a great exercise. I'll surely do it. And especially
Yeah,
when it comes to the practices, I feel it just helps you in such a beautiful way that a lot of times you don't even realize that you've transformed. Like now, if I look at myself, I be like, you know, 5 years back, I had this and this quality, and maybe I used to react to things in a certain way. And over the period of time, it's changed, and I didn't even realize it.
yeah,
So it's so beautiful, and the practices it just helps you so much that, yeah, I mean, when you look back, you realize that, yes, something has changed, or I'm not the same person, or without me even realizing it, I've dropped certain things.
yes,
So
yeah,
it really, really helps. Moving forward, I feel a lot of, especially youngsters, they have this fear about exploring a spiritual path. They feel that getting into spirituality or exploring the practices might just distance them from the worldly life. They might lead towards renunciation. They might lose their ambition, or to be somewhere in their life, or to achieve something in their life. And as a result, because of that fear, they prefer to not explore the spiritual path. And you just said that, Babaji said that it's how important it is for us to balance our material life and worldly life. It's kind of easy to go to the Himalayas and sit there, and
yeah,
but it's tough to be here, surrounded by your family and with the responsibilities, and still not lose the sanity.
yeah. Okay. And it's a very good question. And there are times, for example, when chakra 2 of the heart opens up, where, you just feel like meditating, and you could easily stop going to work or stop going to college or whatever. So it's not what we want. This whole thing is about balance. And like I mentioned before, if you don't engage at the human level, if you just walk away from that and sit and meditate, it has a term in Western psychology which is called spiritual bypassing. And it's not what we're aiming for in Sajmarg. When you look at the highest state in Sajmarg, which is beyond how most people see, this point of Satchitananda, we go beyond bliss. And the samadhi state that's associated with that in Sajmarg is known as Sahaj Samadhi, which is where there is total awareness, total 360-degree awareness, as Daji calls it, which means I'm aware of my inner condition all the way to the center of my being. And at the same time, I'm also aware of what's going on around me. I might be talking to somebody, I might be playing with a child, I might be doing some work or whatever. And he often describes how Babaji would sit there with one eye on the heart and one eye on the world, interacting. So these two things are going on in an integrated way. They're not separate. So I'm not renouncing worldly life, because worldly life, through all this emotional mastery that we talked about before, is how I develop the qualities that will help me move spiritually. And the spiritual refinement, the purification, the simplification of my being, removing all these samskaras that are holding me back, that work helps on the worldly level as well. So it's not that this old idea of them being separate somehow is exactly what Sahaj Marg has revolutionized in this modern era. There is no need to run away to the forest. There is no need to be celibate. There is no need to give up worldly existence. There's a need to refine it, yes, but that's what, the UN's telling us the planet needs right now too. Why are we in the mess that we're in as human beings? Because we've overindulged in all that stuff. We haven't lived a life that is simple and that is respectful of other people, even ourselves, respectful of ourselves first, other people, and the world we live in. And so if you go back to reality at dawn, and then Babaji talks about it here in the Heartfulness Way too, he talks about this word vyavahara, which means our human duty. So he asks us, and this is another good exercise for you all, which I'm sure a lot of young people would love, is that when you go into any place, it could be your home, it could be your place of work, what are my responsibilities as a human being to myself, to others, and to the environment? And am I living these? Because this is how the consciousness, the expanded consciousness of meditation, manifests in our living as conscience. I receive things in meditation, like you said, that change me. I no longer am stuck with the same habits anymore, right? I'm no longer stuck with the same patterns, the same fears, the same worries. But what am I doing with that consciousness? What am I doing with what meditation has given me? And so this idea of Vyavahara is just an amazing thing. And I'll give you an example. At the moment we've been compiling all the content for the Shaijampur ashram for the 50 years anniversary next year. And one of the things is where people talk about how Babaji looked after resources in the ashram. And one example is where the marble that came for the meditation hall floor and pillars, etc., the first truck that came, everything was smashed because it was a storm, the roads were bumpy, and the poor driver, by the time he got to Shaijampur from wherever he came from in UP, everything was broken. And at first, Babaji was devastated because, the donors of the mission had put all their money into this. So what did he do? He asked the mason to use all the broken bits. And that mason used every last bit of marble, no matter how tiny, in the wall friezes, in the floors, and of course it looked superb. He did not waste one bit of marble dust. And so if we start to look at what are my responsibilities as a human being to my fellow beings, even to myself, as a starting point, it will stand you in really good stead, because you're not running away from the world. You're meditating in the morning, but then you're using that during the day. You're using it in your worldly life, for yourself, in your relationships. Imagine a marriage or a partnership where you bring that sense of kindness and goodness and love that you've received to everyone else around you. wouldn't that make your worldly life a lot better?
Absolutely.
So it's not running away, it's becoming better, kinder, more respectful and more dutiful human beings.
Absolutely. I love it how beautifully you've explained it. And moving forward, I want to know, in a world full of spiritual teachers, what is the true role of a guide on one's journey? And how does heartfulness offer guidance with authenticity and responsibility?
Whoa, what a question. My dear, have we got hours? No, we don't have hours.
Yes, we're a bit short of time, but
Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
if you could.
The chapter, I think it's chapter 6. It's called Love
Yeah.
and Support, and it's about the role of the guide, the master.
Yeah.
It's very beautiful. And basically what Daji's doing is he's explaining to us again how we need to look at this. And it's interesting because he doesn't go into the human qualities of the master all that much. Yes, the integrity, the piety, all that sort of stuff is there. But he's really talking about, he asks how to find a capable guide. And he says that we recognize it at a different level of our being. And this is maybe something that really impacts Indian culture a lot, because you've grown up in a tradition unlike the tradition I grew up in, which was non-devotional, where gurus have been part of the culture for thousands of years. And people have an attitude of what a guru is, and it's very much associated with a worship state of being, with darshan, and very much also the human being. Whereas Daji's talking about something else. He's talking about working beyond time and space. He's talking about the transmission, and he says transmission is the essential thing. The master transmits the true impulses to awaken and nourish the soul and provides the necessary support towards realization. He transmits to our hearts to remove the impurities and complexities. The attainments of higher states are because of this yogic transmission. So, later on, then he's talking about how Lalaji developed this transmission. And of course, it was there thousands of years ago, 72 generations before Lord Dasharatha, as Babaji tells us. But Lalaji did much more. So when we talk about the master, the role of the guide or the master in heartfulness, we're looking at something that's very much beyond. The recognition comes from the soul. It's the impulse of the soul touching another soul that makes this work. It's why we feel something so deep inside. It's not about knowing or understanding or having a conversation with the master or anything like that. It's at a much, much deeper level of our being, at the soul level of our being. And he says, first Lalaji transmitted to mentor and transform his associates. Second, he developed a method whereby there would be continuity of the transmission from one living master to the next. That is something that is a revolution. You think about it, Swami Vivekananda didn't have anybody he could give that to. He had to wait for Babaji to come along. It's some of the highest masters, some of the highest teachers, things just fell off and became religion after they left their physical body, because there wasn't the capacity that Lalaji developed to do that. And third, Lalaji created a method to prepare trainers. So again, we had conduits for the master's transmission, so that this functions as a distribution network all over the world. The network spreads heartfulness spreads. I mean, it's a phenomenal thing that we have. And his focus in this chapter, a lot of it is on that level and how we understand and relate to that level. Because it's not that the living master isn't important, the living master is everything, because the transmission flows through them. And whether we like the look of their face or the style of clothing they wear is irrelevant. It's what we feel in the way of love and connection that's important. Of course, it's important to meet your master or to be in close proximity to your master at least once in your life. But Babaji didn't spend a lot of time with Lalaji. It was only a handful of times, a couple of handfuls of times that he was there. And yet look at the closeness of their relationship. So again, it's a great chapter to read. It goes into a lot more depth than that. I mean, we don't have time, otherwise we could spend hours on this. But, you know, this is such an important topic and chapter in the book. It's an important part of what heartfulness is. But it's something we often misrepresent. So he's trying to demystify and dispel our beliefs again, our beliefs about what a guru is.
Absolutely. Absolutely, sister. So, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time, but before we end the session, one last small question. Um, how is Heartfulness Way 2 different from the first one? And any one small experience which you would like to share? Because I'm sure you have spent a lot of time, when you were working on this book with Daji. Any one conversation or experience which you had, which just stayed with you, which you'd want to share?
Okay, so what's the first question again? Sorry, I lost it in the
How
second one.
how I'm sorry. How is Heartfulness Way 2 different from the first one?
So the first book is very much about the doing, the practice, and why we do the practice. It's centered around that. You know, at the beginning of the book is this beautiful quote: philosophy is thinking, yoga is doing, realization is undoing. And so the Heartfulness Way 1, if you like, is the doing part. What are the practices? Why we do it? You know, what is our goal? All this sort of stuff. But this book then takes us into the undoing, to realization. And Daji maps out in it everything we need to attain that within this very lifetime. And he's telling us we can do this, as Babaji did in Reality at Dawn. He's saying you may start with all these limitations, all these beliefs, all this heaviness in your system. You may be complex, you may be an emotional, all over the place. But if you do this, essentially, if you do meditation, cleaning, and prayer, and you see then the effect of the way it changes your consciousness and use that in your living with your conscience, you can attain God realization. He's making it so simple and such a shortcut. And I think that's the thing that sometimes we maybe don't even believe, because if we did, we wouldn't doubt anything. We have to overcome ourselves. We have to get out of the way, as he says. We're not trying to achieve anything. We're trying to allow God to come to us, not reach up to God. So it's so simple. It's been made so simple for us. We make it complex. As in terms of experience, I think what has touched me most is not in the words, but in Daji's way of being, and watching that evolve so much over the years since we were in Manapakam with Charaji, him become a master, and then over these last 10 years, how that has blossomed into a state of being where there's a constant There's a constant learning almost by download. It's not that he has to say anything. It's that in being around and seeing how evolutionary he is in his state of being, how beautifully that unfolds, how when he's struggling with something in himself, you can see him figuring out how to move to the next stage with it. It's again that thing like a small child where there's no hiding any of this. It's just in front of you and unfolding. And you can see at times that he's obviously working in multiple dimensions at once. For those of you who've read A Symphony of Love, the whispers with the special sittings that Daji was giving Mama Helen during the period from 2012 to 17, you see him evolve even in terms of his spiritual entity. At the beginning of these conversations, he wasn't there. He couldn't engage at that level. And then at some point he enters the conversation and it's just a phrase or a sentence. And as he builds the capacity to communicate from his spiritual entity, then whole paragraphs come into being, and he's entered the conversation just like Lalaji and Babaji and the spiritual entity of Charaji and Swami Vivekananda and Mama. They're all in it together, and he's at that level then. So having seen this, having understood that this never stops, having understood his utter humility in the sense that it's not something that, again, that he tries to be. It's something that just emanates from that inner condition. He says in here, the master is the most surrendered being. And that's what you see. You see that amazing graciousness, grace in action, you can call it, which is what I would call graciousness in his being. And that for me has been the biggest gift and the biggest lesson to learn from.
That's wonderful, Sister Elizabeth. One of the things that stayed with me was, as you said, God realization is simple. It's us who make it, like we make it complex, which is true. Yes. So
we add all sorts of stuff on top of the simplicity.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely, sister. Thank you so very much for being a part of this session, and I'm truly, truly grateful that I got this opportunity to be in conversation with you. And I'm sure the audience must have enjoyed it. This conversation would just, would want them to explore Heartfulness Way too, and it'll just help them deepen their journey. One small thing I would like to mention before we end the session would be on 21st of December, it's World Meditation Day. I will be meditating online with Daji, and I request beautiful, and I request everyone who's a part of this live session to come together, join us online. Let's meditate together for harmony and peace. And you all will get a scanner. You can scan it and register for it. It's World Meditation Day on 21st of December. Let's all come together and, meditate. By any chance, if you guys missed the scanner, you can go to the Instagram page of Heartfulness Institute. You will find a scanner there. And till then, stay connected. Keep listening to your heart. Thank you so much, Sister Elizabeth, for being a part and for joining. And thank you, everyone,
Thank
to
you,
be a part
Kamya.
of this session. Thank you.
Thank you.